Oh, he's on camera. Holy shit. All right, can I put you on stream?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
All right, fuck yeah. What's up, man?
Hi, nice to meet you.
All right, so your name is Mikkel, right?
It is indeed. Am I coming through clearly? Is all good?
Yeah, you are. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about what you want, or like what do you want to talk to me about, and like what do you do right now? What's going on?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, my name's Mikkel. I work in the software industry in Denmark, and I do a bunch of research on the side about teams, team culture, team performance, and particularly how team culture affects performance. So I've been talking to a lot of different software teams in the Copenhagen region about how their ability to talk about mistakes and be vulnerable and maybe sway a bit away from very traditional techie obsessive people's behavior around these things affects what cool stuff they do.
Okay.
And I've been playing WoW for many, many years and been following your stream a lot. And I think a while back you were talking about, you made a video series with some of the guys from some of the EU guilds, and you were talking a bit about differences of culture between how you sort of handled things. And you made some
Yeah.
particular comments that I was super interested in.
Oh, okay. Uh,
Yeah.
all right, and you're not a hidden echo spy, right? You're not gonna go right back to them with this information.
Oh, oh, of course. I am DMing all of this to Gingy live as we speak.
Okay, shit.
Of
Well,
course.
all right, all right. So
Well,
that's really cool. All right, what do you want to know?
awesome. First of all, do you mind if I record this as well? I guess yours is being recorded
It's
as well.
literally being
Just
recorded. You can do whatever you want. Yeah.
awesome. Thank you. Well, so as I mentioned, I'm talking a lot about this. It's a culture of psychological safety, is what some people call it. It's a very fancy word for saying how one is open to challenge the way things are, voice their concerns, opinions, and talk about mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the very short of it all. But
Yeah.
I remember you talked about at one point that something that you do quite a lot in Liquid, even during the race to world first, is like just shoot the shit a lot, even like during polls, even on hard bosses.
Hmm.
And you also mentioned specifically, I think you mentioned this thing that sometimes when you get new recruits in, there'll be like a mechanic where someone has to soak a circle. And let's say that this new recruit is like literally standing 1 foot away from the circle, but one of your raid members was actually able to soak it, and they failed. They will immediately go, "That's on me. I could have handled that."
Correct. Yeah.
And I thought to myself, like, where did that come from? And do you think that is part of what makes you so good, or like, is that something you think consciously about? Is it just how you are, or what do you think?
Well, okay, so I think that's like it's a process of extreme ownership. It's like everything you could have done something better, even if it's 1% the new person's fault, or sorry, 99% the new person's fault and 1% yours. Being that person to come up ahead of it and say that you could have done something will leave an impression on them. This actually isn't something I think you would need to implement in a team that already has a really good working atmosphere. This was something we had to do because when we were in an original guild, we were made from like 5 different guilds with 5 different leadership types and morale and atmospheres, and like we were having some issues with people being really defensive with mistakes. So something we did as officers were like, okay, we're the people in the guild, we're respected. For this next tier, I want all of you, myself included, like if you could have done anything better, instantly set an example, instantly admit mistakes, try to help others. If someone else messed up, the reality is if you have a good player, they know they messed up. Even if they have a little ego thing, or even if they've been in a guild, we actually had a few players that were parts of guilds where like they had a tyrannical leader, and like when you made a mistake, they were literally conditioned to like defend themselves to the death, or else someone was going to like come after them, right? So like it's, if you've raided in an atmosphere like that for 4 or 5 years, this even can happen with new players. It's really hard to break out of that mechanism that exists in your brain where you make a mistake and you instantly feel like you have to defend yourself because you were just in an atmosphere where people attacked you for doing that, right? So a way for us to break people out of that is if you come into a guild, you're good, you know what you're doing. You wouldn't be good if you're good if you're here, right? And if you see, you know when you're making a mistake if you're good. If you make a mistake, and even people you know that are good that make a mistake and are deflecting blame, deep down they know they did it. If you start doing that and you see someone else that, I think the example you used, and I'll explain it again for chat, is this, it's actually kind of a really old fight. Maybe I can think of a new analogy, but on like Kill Jaden, when you had to soak one of the little small circles and you're assigned spots of the room to soak them. Let's say there's a new player and he was right next to it and he didn't move. He like either didn't notice or whatever, but then there's someone else who was 5 yards away. That player, as soon as the wipe is over, know they messed up. But what you might hear the veteran player who is 5 yards away, they might be like, oh guys, that was on me. I could have soaked that. And it is true they could have soaked that. It's also true that that other person probably should have. But that player will see the ownership from the more experienced player and be like, oh shit. They might not say anything about it. They'll never talk about it, those two people, but it will leave a lasting impression on that person that it is okay to admit mistakes, immediately move on. And an atmosphere like that is really the only way at this level we can compete. If you spent 5 minutes assigning blame after all of these polls, I mean, you'd be horrible, right? Like you have to quickly identify mistakes, problem solve, move on, go, right? So you have to be in that kind of mindset, and that's something we did a long time ago. I will mention though, we don't really have to do that anymore. That was something we did when we had a lot of people with that, like I would almost say syndrome or condition, where they felt the need to defend themselves. That isn't a thing now. I mean, if you're in this guild, you know, if you're in this guild, people know that you're good enough to be here. You don't feel insecure about that. And we have never had an issue in years. And maybe it's because we acted like that for so long, but we haven't had an issue in years where someone would unironically mess up and be like afraid to say it. So I would say this helped develop our culture, but it is unnecessary to do now.
And do you like? I'm just curious, like, how did that appear? Because what you're talking about there sounds a bit like leading by example, essentially, which is a really powerful mechanism in a lot of these things. And I just wonder, at least in let's say in programming, that's where I typically work.
Yeah.
That you tend to see these profiles, not so much anymore, but you used to, like what people call the rock star developer, right? The guy who sits in his corner with his sandals and socks on and some convention hoodie, and he's super good, is what everyone says. So you don't bother John because he's super good. He's a bit of an asshole, but he's super good. Did you ever get those types of players? Because I at least know from my playing experience, I've definitely played with those kinds of guys. Or do they never make it to that level?
That's a great question. So, man, I'm trying to think. I mean, you definitely have people that like are really good and know they're good. There is a small difference, but there is a definite difference between confidence and arrogance, right? Someone who knows they're very good at something, and someone who's smart and is good at something is going to know that they're good at it, and it's exuding confidence rather than exuding I'm just better than you, right?
Right.
I would say oftentimes people like that don't make it to this level. So like here's an example of a player, someone who's really, really talented, naturally really talented, and you know, they have all the really, really high level intuition that makes you really, really good at this. You're really smart. Your ability to solve problems on your own personal level is really fast. But you have this small problem where every time you make a mistake, you have a habit of it being someone else's fault. If you're a league player, it's the jungle didn't gank when he was supposed to. If you're like someone like it's always something else could have done something better. Those people often make it like 80 to 90% of the top. They might be in a top whatever world guild, but as far as making it to the very, very top with how selective our guild and Echo has been for so long, those people don't usually quite make it to that level because they're literally prohibiting themselves from getting better. Like you admitting to yourself that you messed up is a growth tool, right? Like I messed up. How can I fix that? If you genuinely think, oh, you did everything right and this person could have done something better, you usually, even if you're very talented, just because of a bad mindset, you will end up capping out at a lot lower level than you're capable of, right? So that's pretty common. As far as still having people like that, because you see this in sports too. You see people who are absolute superstars in sports and they make it to the highest levels and they're still just me, super selfish and stuff like that. I would say that in other sports, you have the ability as an individual to have a much bigger impact than you do in WoW. In WoW, you have a 20-man raid. You can have an absolute all-star in your raid, but that's not going to really affect your guild in the same way that like a really good striker would be in football, or a basketball. In basketball, like stars are everything. Like a star dominates your ability to perform in the game. I think I don't know in WoW with 20 people if you can have that impact, and I think oftentimes in a large group environment of 20 people working together really closely, an attitude like that is so detrimental that their skill difference, if possible, wouldn't be worth the problems with working with them. So that being said, I don't think I've actually personally dealt with a lot of those players. I think they get weeded out before they get to this level. But I think even if that person made it here, they would be really hard. Like, for example, if I'm fired up, like someone in our guild who a lot of people are aware is very good, a mage player, if he was like really hard to work with and people, like really didn't like admitting things, people thought he was kind of an asshole, he just wouldn't last in this guild. Like if people don't want to be around someone in this guild, we would get rid of them, I think. That doesn't really happen, but that would be how we dealt with it. I think that's how most competitive teams should deal with that.
Yeah, I think that I would tend to agree, and I think I find it a bit fascinating because is that sort of part of the process of how you recruit? Do you select for this, or does it sort of
No,
just happen
never.
organically? Or
Never. I mean, we don't even do interviews. So in WoW, it's really unfortunate as opposed to sports, and maybe with people working with. Actually, you said you work software engineer, programming, stuff like that.
Yep.
Okay, so,
Yep.
how well do you think you'd be able to tell that someone was good at their job if they did a code test or some kind of thing where they just had to do some fresh out of school thing to like show your code? As far as I can tell from talking to a few software engineers, they can tell you people who are the absolute best coders that would need 8 people to do their job that would not do well on a code test going into a new job, right?
For sure.
So you know people are the shit because you work with them and you see what they're able to do with the tasks that are given to them, and there's really no way to test for that. WoW is the exact same way. So like there's no metric that could tell you if someone was good enough to do this. Logs are a complete joke. So you have to play with them, right? So like I would say it's more that. Like you just have to play with people to figure out if they're good.
Yeah, I used to be the healing officer for my Mythic Raid team and had to recruit people based on logs, and I can tell
healers
you
are the
healing
worst.
logs.
Yeah,
I'm sure you know it. But I mean, I think for from a programming perspective, like typically, I guess you said there is no interview part. I remember we did recruiting for my guild. We were doing like these surveys, and people had to fill this stuff out. And I think we tried to select for this a little bit because you said like no amount of skill is worth an asshole. But do you have anything like that? Like even if it isn't an interview? Or?
Like I mean, here's how we would find someone. So typically, when we would recruit someone, it would be someone in our guild playing with someone at some point, either in some other guild or in Mythic Plus, and they'd be like, I think this guy's great. And then the next thing we would do is we would like log on some random level 1s on this person's server and just be like, we would just ask someone in their guild unprompted, who's the best player in your guild? A lot of the times they won't answer because you're just some random level 1, but every now and then you'll get a list of answers, and we would just need enough people to just definitively say that person, right? Because like I think that's the best.
Interesting.
That's the best way to find out if someone's good enough to play here is like, if people who play with you are like, yo, this guy's the shit. No logs or anything. If it's a good enough guild are going to equal like someone doing stuff like that. I think people have started to figure out that we do that. But that's like the best thing you can do because this also weeds out other things. If that person's a total fucking douchebag, how likely are random people unprompted going to answer the question of who's the best person in your guild, not referencing logs, not referencing any kind of statistics? Are you going to say the name of the person who might be really good but everyone dislikes? Probably not. So like having someone vouch for you unprompted to someone kind of is telling you a little bit about their personality as well, because they
really
are
fascinating.
Somewhat agreeable or likable. Yeah. No, sorry, you're fine. And so that's kind of why we do that, because like interviews in WoW are fake, and maybe this is true everywhere, and people still do them that are much smarter than we are. So maybe we're wrong for doing this, but I just feel like in an interview, anyone's just going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. It's kind of like a vibe check more than anything else. But someone who's not a complete idiot is just going to pass the vibe check. You just say super agreeable things that are irrelevant, and it just seems like a waste of everyone's time. So I'd rather just get them in the guild, see how they vibe in a raid, because as soon as someone new in this guild joins a raid, you're just going to have half of our players just like talking to them throughout the entire raid, and you'll get an instant vibe from this person, and I think that matters more than anything else. And then it's just about their ability to play the game, which you see over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually, privately in the company I work at now, we've begun instigating hiring processes where we try to get people to like work for an hour or half a day if they want to, just swing by for that exact reason.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting. I had one more question actually, so maybe just circle back a bit to that culture if you don't mind, and also feel free to kick me off at any point.
No,
right?
You're good. Yeah.
Awesome. So one thing you mentioned originally in this video clip that I'm talking about is like you talked about how this was quite different with you guys compared to I can't remember which EU guild it was at the time. Maybe it was Echo. Where you said like they're all serious and you have this very jovial tone. You also talk about these mistakes and stuff. Yeah. And I wonder like is that difference like intentional or organic? And B, do you think it affects performance? Like is that why you've been able to beat them sometimes? Maybe. I mean that's maybe a bit with a stretch.
Well, yeah, as far as like winning or losing, I also can't fully speak to how Echo runs. Like they mute their comms a lot of the times. so I can't fully speak to their atmosphere. Like I know people who have rated there. I have multiple friends that have rated here and there, and you hear things. But I think it's pretty clear from a viewer that there's like a difference in like the level of levity. I think in the raid. As far as that being good or bad, I don't know if that's something that we force. I think that's more just us being ourselves. I've also noticed this in a lot of English-speaking European guilds that, and maybe this is kind of me guessing here, but I know in America when you're raiding with mostly people, we do have some European players who play here, but like our initial guild culture was established before that. When you listen, the average English-speaking EU guild, they're much more direct, and it's because English isn't a lot of their first languages. So in a way, like when you're bringing things up, it's just kind of straight to the point and there's less like beating around the bush. That could be a cultural difference. It could be a language, second language thing. But I've noticed that EU guilds in general are just more direct. And a lot of times that can be perceived by people who are not used to that culture as being toxic. But that's just because I think in a lot of ways, American guilds, NA guilds are actually kind of the opposite of that. It's like, you're not going to address something. I actually kind of prefer the EU way, to be honest with you. We do that. We do the EU way of like, you address things instantly. You can't, like, if you're just the person that's never going to talk about something, people are going to talk about it after raid. If it's not addressed in public, people are going to address it themselves. That's how that works. So you kind of need to do it right away, but there's a way to do that with respect. I'm sure Echo probably does that. I actually can't speak too much to them. I actually think both of our guilds have had really good success, and I think it's fascinating that we operate clearly totally differently, but I don't think that that's too unlike most major sports. I'm aware of some guilds that or not guilds, but like some teams that are like, the guys don't really like each other, but they're really good and they make it work. And there are some teams that are like super tight, and you could see people make the argument that like us being so tight knit as a group makes us better, and then others that are like kind of at odds, there's multiple cliques that are kind of going against each other, whatever, like, but they can still succeed. So I would say this would be an excellent question, I think, to bounce off. Maybe there's a few people. So Tobo, Wolf Disco, now I'm trying to think of people who have raided in both guilds would probably be a really good person to ask about this, like as a one-off, because I'm sure they'd be able to tell you like the differences and maybe how that benefits or doesn't benefit. Because most of it for me is not easy because I'm kind of guessing as to the effects that has on them, or even what their atmosphere is truly like. I don't like we are much more open. Like if you watch us in progression, when we are streaming Mythic Progression, we have our comms unmuted 100% of the time. Their comms are muted almost all the time, so you are able to hear how we interact. You don't really get to see how they interact in like a high pressure situation most of the time, so it's really hard for me to answer that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and thank you for those ideas. I think that's an interesting approach, and I think I wonder. So on your side of things, you talk about like this culture enables you to have the hard talks essentially, right? And I think that's one of the key reasons why it might help you. It's not about being PC or cozy or nice. It's that you can actually talk about the more difficult things. And I just wonder, like, is that something you train between races? Like, is there something where do you have conversations with the players about this? Is it mostly like a leadership kind of thing, or do people just live with it, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, you have to have those hard conversations to succeed at this level. Like, if after a pull is over and I know I need to address something with a player and it has to do with something they're doing and I want to change it, either they were doing something intentionally wrong, bad, or whatever, I have to have the conversation with them of trying to change it. That can be done adversarially, or it can be done with respect, and both kind of accomplish the same thing. Again, as far as like group morale and atmosphere, like that can have some effects on that. But like, I think what you just do is you just have a long-standing rapport with people. They know that like if I make a mistake or if one of our officers makes a mistake, they're never going to hide from it, right? Or if we need to change something we're doing, we're going to be open with that. So hopefully our players see that, and then when we have to tell them something that, it could be hard. You could be on your 5th 16-hour raid day in a row. You're having a bad day. That can happen. You didn't eat a lot. You didn't get a lot of sleep. And you're just in a bad mood, and then you messed up. And you know what you really don't want to hear when you already know you messed up is like someone bringing it up in front of 100,000 people, right? Live on stream. That can just do shit to your brain, right? Like, it's not easy to do that. I think the only way you can really condition yourself for that is to just have respect for people, know they're not going to bring it up. Like, I would hope that none of my raiders, if I bring up something to them, if Zisevi, if Scott brings something up to them, that they're not going to respond. They know that we're not bringing it up on a personal level. It is only to succeed as a group. And I think that just can only really come from a long time of playing with these people and a level of respect. Because you can tell someone, you know, basically you fucked up and need to change it, but obviously give them something to change. Pointing that out and without any like solution doesn't really do anything. But like you can do that with respect and then just immediately move on. It's probably a lot harder to do that if you like are aggressive, I guess. So it's not really about how you say it either. It can be really direct. There has to be a level, you have to respect them and they have to know that you respect them. And if that is true, I think you can kind of say whatever you want to anyone as long as it's being productive. Yeah.
I think that makes a ton of sense, and I think it sounds like to me that this baseline cultural agreement, or whatever you want to call it, kind of allows you to do a lot of things that would be challenging without it, and more than actively engaging with it is like the enabler and the catalyst for all of the other things that you can just kind of do.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, let's just throw it the other way. Again, I can't really speak to Echo's culture, but let's just say it's a lot less like respectful, I guess, when you're saying it to people. It might be more like, you know, I'm sure there's a level of respect. Like I really am just kind of guessing here to answer part of your question. Where it's like sometimes you can do the same thing, saying something to someone to fix something with respect, and then also saying it when you're clearly really mad and people are like sighing and really mad about it. That's the same thing. Like you're kind of accomplishing the same thing. Maybe that person's morale is a little higher or lower for the 20 minutes after that, or maybe you're so used to that atmosphere that it just doesn't faze you. Like you're just built like a brick, you know, you're just like, you have a crazy mental. I don't really know the benefits. Psychologically, it's really interesting, I think, how that happens to people. I just know for us, it's not really a forced, I would say it's much less about a forced way to do things. We don't intentionally do that with respect or be nice or whatever. It's just kind of who we are, who I am, who groups of people are in the guild that naturally just work with each other. But if I think if like it's possible that if you listen to a lot of other teams from different cultures, that could sound different, but you could still solve the same problem with the same efficiency. And if as long as people are used to that and know what to expect, like here's an example. If you were to put one of our players who've raided here for a long time and put them into Echo's environment, they might fucking hate it. It might be the exact same thing, but they just don't like it. You could do the exact same thing the other way. You could throw like Gingy in our guild and like we're joking around during a poll and he'll want to fucking die. Like he would want nothing to do with that. Like he would think that we're like fucking throwing or like we're like, it's just like you get used to a certain atmosphere and that atmosphere works for you and for your team, and that's just how it works. But it's possible that it wouldn't work. Maybe someone would prefer one rather than the other, right? I definitely think that's true.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think from my own raid experiences, I've definitely been on both sides of that spectrum. So of course, on a much less intense level.
Yeah.
But I think I also wonder, like, how do you know that works for your players, right? Because just to give you an example of what you spoke about before, like we know that fear is a pretty good motivator, or shame or being called out in the short term, right? Like if someone makes you feel really shit, like let's say on a live stream in front of 100,000 people, your most pressing motivation is going to be to not do that. But often it means you're optimizing for the wrong thing, right? You're trying to not make mistakes rather than to win, let's say. And I wonder, like, do you any comments? Yeah?
Well, I mean, fear can be a big motivator. I would say that's something we never do. I actually like completely disagree with that. I think if you're playing, whether it's in front of the 20 people in your raid or 100,000 people, solving a problem and having the person understand it and treating them with respect is just, in my opinion, personally, always going to get a better response than someone who you give the exact same information to. You're solving the same problem, but instead you ridiculed them and made them feel embarrassed in front of 100,000 people. The whole like performing out of fear, I am of the opinion that absolutely no one plays better in WoW in a bad mood ever.
For sure. So, I agree, and I think what I meant to say is that like that might work for some people in the short term, in that they won't make that mistake, but usually it has lasting damages, and it's not a good way to go about that, for sure.
That's how I feel. But if someone disagreed with that and they were like, no, actually, like, because like there's like the military, for example, is very direct, very aggressive leadership, and that works for them. Like maybe it works for different people in different scenarios, and maybe different people need different levels of leadership. They need that really hard cut stuff. I just don't think that would really work for us at all. And I've seen it before. I've seen players like make a mistake, be down on themselves, and then get that extra motivation of like, hey man, just letting you know you fucked up. And then when you add the like, you never know how people will react. And then if you add the whole like 40,000 people are now typing in chat that you fucking suck or whatever, all these random people that don't even play this game are telling this insane player that they're bad, right? That can affect anyone, man. And I just cannot possibly believe that that person would play better in the next 15 minutes than if they still solved the same problem but felt respected and weren't getting shit on by tens of thousands of people, right? That's how I feel.
Oh, for sure. I think that makes a ton of sense. Is this like so this whole cultural sort of thing you've got going? It sounds like you have a pretty crystallized idea of what it is. Is that something you talk to the players about frequently as well?
No. I mean, I think maybe every now and then before a race, it can be important to emphasize, like, hey guys, you know, I might have to come at you guys later this week, and you may not be in the best of moods, but just know that it is never personal or whatever. Like, maybe you'll say something like that, but a lot of that is obvious. They've been here. We have a lot of the same players. I would definitely, if we had a bunch of new players, it would be very important to let them know about that. It's also one of the things that why Race World First is experience is so important, because like you need to kind of know what it's like to be in that atmosphere. Like any human being would play so much better in their second or third race than their first, no matter how good you are, because it's just so unique and there's no way to prepare for this. And part of that is definitely the mental required, as well as getting enough sleep and eating and making sure that you're like somehow healthy after that amount of time. Yeah.
Not living off of candy if they don't serve pizza.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. Shout out THD. Yeah, but he's weird. Like he's never like played bad ever, and he eats candy for meals. So who knows?
I also wasn't intentionally just randomly flame him. I just remember that story.
Oh no, you can flame him. Flaming him is warranted. Yeah.
Oh man. So maybe if I can ask one more question, and then I'll let you go as well, because I don't want to waste your time.
No, you're good.
When you sort of so you talk about like this works really well for everyone who's played together for a long ass time. Do you I suppose like how big is your drop off actually between races in terms of new players?
In between raids, the amount of people that quit is almost no one. In between every raid, however, we do usually demote like 3 or 4 players. It depends. I think this tier was less than that. I think it was maybe 2 or 1. And you bring on new people. This is done for a few reasons. People can obviously lose their passion over time. People can get passed up skill-wise. And sometimes people are fine, but they don't serve a certain purpose on your roster because of like the way class balance is in the certain game. You don't need 8. You might need 3 mages, but you don't need 3 hunters or something. You know, like you could have a lot of people alt a hunter, and mage is like more specialized. So it kind of depends on the person. But every now and then someone will quit because they're just kind of burnt out. That actually happened this time. We had one person do that. It's very rare. I would say more often it's demoting people, and it's to bring in new people that either serve a purpose for a specific class you need, or you're just trying to, you know, if you keep the same people for 6 years, you're lacking growth, right? You need to kind of not even trim the fat. Like, honestly, it sucks. Like, I've had to demote people from this guild that are fucking incredible players. They're really good, but like they were sitting for multiple tiers. They weren't really getting any raid time, and there's like this new up and coming player. Like, we recruited a player this tier. He was a tank for vodka last year, and the way we recruited him, going back to how you asked how we recruited earlier, is we actually had multiple people from this guild, including officers, unprompted reach out to us and be like, you got to recruit this guy. Like, this guy's fucking nuts. He was like a 5-time Brawlhalla world champion, randomly started playing WoW. He's just like a super zoomer. He's like 19 or something. And he's just like fucking cracked at the game, right? So like we didn't even need a tank, but we just recruited this guy. And you just find a way to make it work because you need that to happen. Like those are the players that like can, you know, I don't know how many players we currently have in the guild, but you can only bring 20 at a time. And the number closer to 20 or above 20 that you can get that are like truly unbelievable players, the better you're going to be, right? Player skill really matters. It's really hard to find people who are like that guy. So by removing a few players that you've seen for a while, you know what they are, they're reliable, but you need to kind of continue improving your roster. One way to do that is to keep trying the field out and seeing the new up-and-coming players and seeing where they stack up. And I think that's a way to improve over time. Every guild basically does this. You kind of have to do this. Sometimes it happens naturally, but sometimes you have to force it as well.
So on the note, actually, like in the software industry, like a lot of growth happens because of scaling, right? Like you don't have to cap at 20. You can keep hiring, and a lot of people also grow from switching different companies. And so I wonder a bit, like if we view the sort of the career path of a professional WoW player, and you're the end game, right? Like there's not really anywhere to move on past you, and there's only 20 like is that so? When you talk about demotion between seasons and stuff, like is that something that sort of hangs over the head of people, or is it just part of the job, or how does that sort of make people feel?
I mean, it's got to make them feel bad. Like, I mean, like it's been some of the worst, and I don't mean to imply that what I'm going through is worse than what they're going through, but demoting people from this guild is like some of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life, and I know it's worse for them.
Can
But like,
imagine.
you're basically kicking someone that sometimes didn't even really do anything wrong, just someone else was better, or one of those reasons, and you basically have to fire someone from their job and their like main hobby and passion. They may not want to raid anywhere else that isn't here. It's hard to raid. Generally, people who leave here and raid in other guilds just hate it and quit, right? So like I know I'm basically
Yeah.
kicking them from their hobby and their job at the same time, which is like fucking brutal, and I hate that. But yeah, there is only 20 spots. How people usually deal with that is there's other guilds you can raid in. There's like typically who we're recruiting, who Echo has been recruiting for the last 2 or 3 years, is we're recruiting the best player in one of the guilds closely behind us, right? So if you want the race to world first career path is usually just being the best player in your guild, moving up guilds, and eventually we'll find that person. So I think that's generally how that goes. Yeah.
Gotcha. Just out of curiosity, so you talk about this this demotion processes and all this. You talk about like how it feels and the thoughts going around, and I was wondering like what sort of background do you draw upon in that situation? I know you also did something in the software industry. I know you also sang in a choir
Oh
and
yeah,
some other
no.
things.
I did. I
Uh,
basically like right before I started doing the race world first, or right before I started streaming, I was playing WoW the whole time, but I went to like tech school. I didn't do any software engineering. I was like a networking guy, so I like set
mm,
up networking for small and mid-sized businesses. I wasn't very good at my job. I got hired out of my first semester in school and didn't even finish it, and I was like super
oh,
trash, and that was like just the last thing I did before this. I would definitely not call myself a super tech person. I like the most intricate thing I did was with one other person. I set up like a network environment with a server for like a business of like 30 people in their office. Like that was it.
right.
Some baby.
So do you mean you just learned this on the job, or like where does that come from?
Learn what on the job? Learn all of the leadership stuff.
How to manage a
Oh,
organization
great
of
question,
many
actually.
people and go through these things?
So I think what gave me most of my managerial like experience was like right out of college. My brother was running a restaurant and he just needed a supervisor. He didn't have a lot of people he could trust, so I just moved up, started working there, got promoted to supervisor after a while, and then I ended up like running the restaurant mostly. And I like had to make a lot of those decisions and like how to treat people differently based, or how to work with everyone in that scenario was hard. You had some people that were college students, you had high school students, you had people who were in their 40s living paycheck to paycheck, like very different personalities of people. And I think I learned how to like respect people for who they were and deal with that there. That's what gave me some of that, but most of it was just learning on the job. Like I think running a WoW guild is very similar to like running your own business. Actually, like a lot of the same principles. If I were to ever stop doing this and try to get hired somewhere, the probably the most impressive thing I could put is what I've done with the guild. But I doubt anyone would look at that and not laugh at it. But I do think that I learned almost all of it on the job. You do reading and watch videos on leadership, but a lot of it is just you just have to figure it out. I wasn't very good at it when I started, and I got better at it over time because I had to.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of value in that, and I mean, I'm here for that reason, right? I think I attend a lot of conferences where people talk about these experience journeys of how they sort of came to a lot of those conclusions about how leadership works that you can't really read in a book. And I think I've seen some of that in the way you talk about the guild and the culture. So
Mm.
at least in my estimation, there's definitely something there. I think you mentioned sort of the point of not directly, but like the diversity of the people that you've been working with in your past experience. And I imagine that in the guild, people coming from, I mean, I guess it's mostly America, but still, that's a big country in its own right, and I guess a lot of different walks of life and stuff.
Yeah.
Has that been challenging? Is it part of your success, or what do you think how that affects the guild and the culture?
No, I mean we worked from every we have I think we have like a few we had Finnish players, we've had Swedish players, we've had Danish players, we have people from the UK, we've never had any French, few Germans. But yeah, we've had to mix in a lot of different cultures. I will tell you that isn't something I've ever really had to think about. You know? I think if you were to like throw yourself in a Finnish guild, throw yourself in a multicultural English speaking EU guild, it may be a big acclimation or a big thing to acclimate to, but like this has always people from other cultures have always fit right in, and I think a lot of our, and it's not me, a lot of the time it isn't me, like I think our guild's culture is really built up by the average atmosphere of a lot of our players that have been here for a long time, you know, and as soon as someone new joins the guild, no matter where they're from or where they came before this, you're gonna see Shaq and Fired Up and Atlas or whoever invite them to Monday Night Squad, which I believe will be happening tomorrow, and they're just gonna talk to them for like, they're gonna ask them questions every 2 minutes. Sometimes people will you know, react to that differently, but you know, they make them feel involved right away, and I think people usually end up just fitting in here. I've never had a situation ever where someone has come in and just like been a good player and hasn't fit in, you know, like they kind of like everybody. So I wouldn't even say a lot of that is me. A lot of that is because in farm, a lot of the times people aren't doing the same thing. We play the game really hardcore for a couple weeks, and then we kind of just do whatever. So like it's about playing other games with them and like playing beta and getting to know them. But we haven't had too much of an issue with that, and I think it's because we are our own culture, and I would like to think that it's easy for people to acclimate to it. I guess I don't know. It seems pretty accepting of whoever you would want, whoever you are. So we've never had any issues with that, I guess, in short, where people have come in and yeah.
Do you tend to build a lot of that culture outside of the Raid to World first in that case? Do people join you up before the race, and then this mostly happens before that, or?
I think someone probably won't fully get this until they do their first race in the guild, because it is just really this thing that kind of binds us all together. But I don't think it happens it all happens organically. It doesn't happen by, it's like this new person doesn't join, hey, let's set up this thing where they all do it. It's just like, we're all gamers, we all play games all the time. Everyone who games at this level plays a bunch of other different games. You find someone else to queue in, like playing in-house with, queue some battle royale games with, play whatever. Our Discord is usually popping with people that are playing stuff all the time. So it's like, if you want to be a part of that, you can, but if not, then you know, usually it's just around the race.
Yeah, interesting. Like learning on the job. You said like you got to sit down in the real deal to really feel it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, awesome. I think I got around a lot of the topics, and I don't want to take more of your time. I can also see some people in chat are calling me out for taking your time. So sorry about that.
Oh no, it's fine. Yeah, if people came into if people came into the chat late, yeah, this he just wanted to ask me some questions. He had actually asked me, I think in April of this year, like literally months ago, and then I'm really bad at Discord and all forms of communication. So he came into my Twitch channel today and was like, "Hey, just reaching out." And then I was like, "All right, let's just do it live." So, yeah, this was really fun. I don't mind doing stuff like this whenever I have time. So, no problem.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. Like I'm hoping to draw up some comments from you and different people from different industries and try and bring it to a conference at some point. And I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff to learn from these, I guess, less traditional fields of work from all of us nerds who think we've got it figured out. So
oh, absolutely. I mean, this is something
that.
I'm fascinated in. If you are fascinated in, if you ever actually bring this to a conference and you get perspective from leadership positions in different areas and how to, you know, just anything like that. If you had some kind of greater insight on leadership or how things, I mean, that would be one of the first things I'd be interested in reading. So make sure to let me know if you end up doing that.
Awesome. I definitely will. Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
you, man. And good luck with the stream, and see you around, chat.
Yep. See you, Mikkel. Yep. Bye.
Yes. See you, Max. Bye.
All right. Cool. All right. You never know what to expect on my stream, huh? Just random shit happens.